Hello, everyone, and welcome back to English for Migrants. I'm Emma, and today we have another inspiring guest. Jack moved from Spain to Ireland almost 7 years ago. During that time, he transformed not only his English, but also his mindset. Welcome back, Jack.
Thank you, Emma. It's great to be here. When I first arrived in Ireland, I thought learning English would be my biggest challenge. I was wrong. The biggest challenge was changing the way I thought.
That's interesting. Most migrants spend years focusing on grammar. You focused on your mindset. Why?
Because every action begins with a thought. If you constantly tell yourself, my English isn't good enough, your brain starts looking for evidence to prove that statement true. But if you repeat, I'm becoming more fluent every day, your mind starts searching for ways of making that happen. That's the principle of autosuggestion.
I've heard that word many times. What exactly is autosuggestion?
Autosuggestion is the process of influencing your subconscious mind through repeated thoughts, emotions, and beliefs. Napoleon Hill believed that whatever you repeatedly tell yourself with emotion eventually becomes part of your identity. He didn't simply recommend positive thinking, he believed in programming your mind through repetition.
Can you give us an example?
Of course, one of the most famous stories from Think and Grow Rich is about Napoleon Hill's son, Blair. When Blair was born, doctors told Hill that his son would never be able to hear or speak because he had been born without normal hearing. Most parents would probably have accepted that prediction. Hill didn't. Instead of accepting the doctor's words, he continually told his son that he would find a way to hear and communicate with the world. He filled his son's environment with hope, encouragement, and the belief that he was not limited by what doctors expected. Years later, Blair began responding to sounds. Eventually, with the help of hearing technology and relentless determination, he developed the ability to hear and speak. Hill used this story as evidence that belief, persistence, and autosuggestion can profoundly influence a person's life. Whether someone interprets the story as psychology, determination, or something more, its lesson is powerful. Our beliefs often shape our actions, and our actions shape our future.
That's an incredible story. You said, instead of accepting the doctor's words. Why did you choose instead of rather than rather than? Native speakers use both.
Excellent question. Both are correct, but they aren't always used in exactly the same way. Instead of usually means replacing one action with another. For example, I watched a documentary instead of scrolling through social media. Rather than often sounds slightly more formal and emphasizes preference. I chose to study rather than complain. Both are common, but instead of is probably more frequent in everyday conversation.
That's helpful. Then you said, by telling his son. Why by instead of with?
Because by explains the method. How did Hill encourage his son? By telling him repeatedly. If I say, I improved my English by listening to podcasts, I'm explaining how I improved, with usually refers to the tool. I listened with headphones, so by listening. Method. With headphones. Instrument.
That makes perfect sense. I hear another expression all the time. People say, keep going. Why don't they simply say, continue?
They could, but native speakers often prefer short phrasal expressions. Keep going. Keep trying. Keep learning. They're warmer, more conversational, and more encouraging. Continue is correct, but it often sounds more formal.
Another expression caught my attention. You said, I'm becoming more fluent. Why not, I'm getting more fluent?
Both are natural. However, there is a subtle difference. Getting is very common in everyday spoken English. I'm getting better. I'm getting stronger. Becoming sounds more deliberate and describes a deeper transformation. So in a conversation about personal growth, becoming feels stronger.
That's something textbooks rarely explain. Now, let me ask you something else. Many learners say, I have fear, but native speakers usually say, I'm afraid. Why?
Because English often prefers adjectives over nouns when describing emotions. Instead of saying, I have confidence, people usually say, I'm confident. Instead of, I have fear, they say, I'm afraid. It sounds much more natural.
I noticed another sentence. You said, My mind started looking for opportunities. Why not? Searching opportunities.
Because look for and search for both require for when we're talking about something we want to find. Native speakers overwhelmingly say, I'm looking for a job. I'm looking for an apartment. I'm looking for opportunities. You can also say, I'm searching for a solution, but looking for is much more common in everyday English.
Interesting. One last grammar question. You said before making a decision. Why making instead of make?
Because before is a preposition. After most prepositions, English uses the gerund. So we naturally say before leaving, after arriving, without giving up, by practicing, instead of complaining. There's no need to memorize hundreds of rules. Just remember one, preposition to verb plus ing.
Before we finish, if one migrant listening today remembers only one lesson from this episode, what should it be?
Protect the conversations you have with yourself. Your subconscious is always listening. If every day you repeat, my English is improving, I'm becoming more confident, I belong here, eventually your actions begin matching those beliefs. That's why successful people don't only change their habits, they first change their internal dialogue. Your future begins with the words you repeatedly tell yourself.
I couldn't think of a better way to end today's episode. Remember, learning English isn't only about memorizing grammar. It's about changing the way you think, the way you speak, and eventually the way you live. We'll see you in the next episode of English for Migrants.
Bye everyone, see you.